The dragon stood frozen, its massive head hovering just 10 feet from where Hana stood. She could feel the heat radiating from its body, could see the faint glow of fire deep in its throat, but the creature didn't attack. It just watched her with those burning amber eyes, listening to the simple melody she hummed. Hana kept the tune steady, the same few notes over and over. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Don't think of it as a song, Myung had told her when she was just a child. Think of it as breathing with another soul. You match their rhythm and they feel safe. Above them, the Rexian guards were shouting in confusion. Thalrex's voice cut through the noise, sharp and angry. What is happening? Why hasn't it killed her yet? Hana ignored them. She focused entirely on the dragon, on Korath. Slowly, carefully, she lowered herself to her knees, making herself smaller, less threatening. It was the same thing she did when approaching frightened patients, the ones who were in so much pain they couldn't think straight. The dragon's nostrils flared, taking in her scent. Its head moved closer, and Hana could see the details of its face now. Scales layered like armor, each one perfect and sharp-edged. A scar ran across its left eye, old and deep. More scars covered its neck and shoulders, some fresh, some ancient, but it was the wounds that made Hana's heart ache. Around the dragon's neck, burned into the scales, were marks from shot collars. The flesh was infected, oozing. On its right shoulder, 3 deep puncture wounds leaked clear fluid. One of its front claws was broken, hanging at an odd angle. They had tortured this creature. For cycles, maybe longer. They had hurt it until all it knew was pain and rage. Hana's medic instincts took over, pushing past her fear. She reached slowly for the medical pouch still attached to her belt. Somehow, miraculously, the Vrexians hadn't taken it from her. Maybe they thought she wouldn't need it where she was going. Her fingers found the familiar shapes inside. Antiseptic gel, bandages, a small scanner. Not much, but it was something. They hurt you, she whispered in Korean, her native language. The words felt right, felt honest. They hurt you so much. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The dragon's eyes narrowed. It couldn't understand the words, but something in her tone made it pause. The massive head tilted again. A gesture so human-like it startled her. Hana pulled out the antiseptic gel and held it up where the dragon could see. This helps pain, she said softly. It makes wounds better. Can I help you? Korath rumbled deep in its chest. Not quite a growl, but not friendly either. The sound of uncertainty. Hana waited. She stayed perfectly still, holding the gel, her eyes locked with the dragon's. Seconds passed. A minute. 2. The air was so hot she felt dizzy, but she didn't move. Then, slowly, impossibly, the dragon lowered its massive head. It came down until it was level with her, close enough that she could touch it if she dared. The amber eyes watched her, waiting. Hana's hand trembled as she reached out. Her fingers touched scales and they were hot. So hot it almost burned. But they were also smooth like polished stone. Beautiful. The dragon flinched but didn't pull away. Good. Hana whispered. That's good. I won't hurt you. I promise. She moved her hand to the infected wounds around the dragon's neck. Up close they were worse than she thought. The flesh was swollen and red, the burns deep. This must have caused constant agony. Hana squeezed gel onto her fingers and gently, carefully began to apply it to the wounds. The dragon's entire body tensed, muscles coiling like springs. For a heartbeat, she thought it would kill her. But then the gel began to work, its cooling properties soaking in, and the dragon's breathing changed. The tension eased slightly. Better? Hana asked. Does it feel better? A sound came from the dragon's throat. Not a growl. Something else, almost like a sigh. Hana worked carefully, treating each burn, each wound she could reach. Her medical training guided her hands. She had treated plasma burns before on human soldiers. The principle was the same. Clean the wound, reduce the infection, ease the pain. Above them, the guards had gone silent. They pressed against the observation window, staring. This wasn't supposed to happen. The dragon always killed immediately. Always. Thalrex was screaming orders. Do something. Activate the shock collar. Make it killer. But another voice responded, calmer. Commander, the collar was removed 2 cycles ago. It stopped working. The beast's scales grew too thick. Then flood the cell with sleep gas. That hasn't worked in over a cycle. The dragon's biology adapted. Hana heard all this, and a small smile touched her lips. The dragon was stronger than they knew. It had survived everything they threw at it. Just like she would. She finished treating the neck wounds and sat back. "Can I see your shoulder?" she asked, pointing. The dragon watched her for a long moment. Then incredibly it shifted its body, turning to expose the injured shoulder. The 3 puncture wounds were deep, probably from some kind of weapon. They needed to be cleaned and sealed. Hana pulled out her medical scanner, a small device that could analyze tissue and recommend treatment. She ran it over the wounds and the scanner beeped softly. The display showed infection markers, tissue damage, but nothing that couldn't be treated. She worked quietly, cleaning each wound, applying antibacterial gel, then sealing them with synthetic skin patches from her kit. The dragon remained still, watching her work. Occasionally it would make that sighing sound as if relieved. When she finished, Hana looked at the broken claw. That was harder. She didn't have the tools to properly set a bone, especially not one this large, but she could stabilize it, reduce the pain. "This will hurt a little," she warned, "but then it will feel better. I promise." She pulled out a pain blocker injection, the kind used for emergency field treatment. It was designed for humans, but the principle should work, she hoped. Carefully, she injected it near the base of the broken claw. The dragon hissed, pulling back slightly. But then the medication took effect, and the pain lines around its eyes eased. Hana used her remaining bandages to wrap and stabilize the claw. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. When she was done, she sat back on her heels, exhausted. "There," she said. "That's all I can do with what I have." "I'm sorry it's not more." The dragon stared at her. Then, in a movement that made her heart stop, it lowered its head and gently pressed its snout against her chest, just for a moment. A gesture of, what, trust? Gratitude? Hana's eyes filled with tears. She reached up and touched the dragon's face, running her hand along the scarred scales. "You're not a monster," she whispered. "They made you into this. But you're not a monster." Korath's eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, something had changed in them. The rage was still there, but it was quieter now, controlled. Hana felt exhaustion wash over her. She hadn't slept properly in days. Her body ached from the beatings, from the fall into the cell. The adrenaline was wearing off. The dragon seemed to sense this. It moved its large body, positioning itself against the wall, then looked at her expectantly. Hana understood. Slowly she walked over and sat down, leaning against the dragon's side. The scales were warm, almost hot, but not unbearable. The dragon's breathing was steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. "Thank you," she whispered. The dragon's wing extended slightly, creating a shelter over her. Protection. Above, Thalrex was still screaming orders, but his voice seemed distant now. Unimportant. Hana closed her eyes. For the first time in 3 days, she felt safe. Here, in a cell with a dragon that should have killed her, she felt safer than she had anywhere else on this terrible ship. She began to hum again. That same simple melody. The dragon's breathing synchronized with the tune. 2 prisoners, 2 wounded souls finding comfort in each other. Outside, the guards dispersed slowly, confused and disturbed. This wasn't how things were supposed to work. The dragon was supposed to be a weapon, a tool of execution. It wasn't supposed to be gentle. Thalrex stood alone at the window, his hands clenched into fists. "This changes nothing," he hissed. "When she sleeps, it will kill her. Animals cannot be trusted, but he was wrong. So very wrong." As Hana drifted toward sleep, her mind touched something vast and ancient. Memories that weren't hers flooded through. She saw plasma storms and endless skies. She felt the joy of flight, the freedom of soaring through clouds of fire. She experienced the agony of capture, the humiliation of torture, the crushing loneliness of imprisonment. And the dragon felt her memories too. Battlefields and blood. Her brother Tay dying in her arms. His last words asking her to keep saving people. Her oath as a medic. Her promise to never let cruelty win. Their minds brushed against each other, not quite merging, but connecting. Understanding without words. 2 different species, 2 different worlds, finding common ground in shared pain and shared hope. When Hana finally fell asleep, the dragon stayed awake, watching over her. Its amber eyes glowed softly in the darkness. For the first time in cycles, Korath didn't feel alone. The prison ship floated in the darkness of space like a massive metal beast. Its hull was black and covered with strange symbols that glowed with a sickly green light. Inside, the air smelled of oil and something bitter that made human throats burn. This was a Vrexian vessel, and everyone in the galaxy knew what that meant. The Vrexians showed no mercy. Corporal Hana limped down the corridor, her hands bound behind her back with energy cuffs that burned her wrists. Her medical uniform was torn and stained with blood, some of it hers, most of it from the soldiers she had tried to save. 2 Vrexian guards walked beside her, their gray skin pulled tight over sharp bones, their eyes like black marbles that showed nothing. She had been captured 3 days ago on the battlefield of Arcturus 7. The human forces had been losing ground, and the wounded kept coming. Hana had set up a field hospital in an abandoned building, working without rest. She didn't care which side the wounded came from. A dying soldier was just a dying soldier, and her oath as a medic was clear. Save everyone you can, that was her mistake. The Vrexians found her treating one of their own soldiers, a young fighter who had been caught in an explosion. The boy was crying for his mother in the Vrexian language. Hana didn't understand the words, but she understood pain. She had stopped the bleeding and given him something for the agony. When Commander Thalrex arrived with his unit, he saw what she was doing. For a moment something flickered in his cold eyes. Surprise, maybe. Then it was gone, replaced by anger. He grabbed the wounded soldier and threw him against the wall. The boy died instantly, neck broken. Hana had screamed and tried to reach him, but Thalrex backhanded her across the face. She fell hard, tasting blood. The commander stood over her, his thin lips pulled back to show teeth filed to points. "You dare show mercy to my soldiers?" he hissed in broken human language. "You make them weak. You make them forget their purpose." Hana glared up at him, her vision blurry. His purpose was to live. "That's everyone's purpose." Thalrex laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Stupid human. You understand nothing." He turned to his guards. "Take her. She will learn what happens to those who show weakness." Now 3 days later, Hana was deep inside the prison ship. She had been kept in a small cell with no light and barely any food. They had asked her questions about human military positions, medical supplies, and defensive strategies. She told them nothing. Each time she refused, they hurt her a little more. Nothing permanent, nothing that would kill her, but enough to make the point clear. The guards stopped in front of a massive door made of some dark metal. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing and pulsing like a heartbeat. One of the guards pressed his hand against a panel, and the door began to slide open with a deep grinding sound. Thalrex was waiting on the other side. Behind him was a huge window that looked into an enormous cell. The cell was the size of a warehouse, with walls of black stone and a floor covered in scorch marks and deep scratches. In the far corner, something massive moved in the shadows. "Ah, our guest arrives," Thalrex said, his voice dripping with false politeness. "I have been thinking about what to do with you, human. You are too stubborn to break with simple pain. You need something more creative." Hana said nothing. She kept her face blank, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. Thalrex gestured to the window. "Do you know what we keep in this cell? No? Let me tell you a story." He walked closer, his breath cold on her face. 5 cycles ago, my ships were exploring the plasma storms of Sindara Prime. Beautiful world, very dangerous. In those storms, we found creatures. Dragons, you might call them. Massive beasts made of rage and fire. He smiled, showing those pointed teeth again. We captured one. The strongest, the most vicious. We call him Koreth. He has killed 17 of my guards. His scales cannot be pierced by our weapons. His breath melts steel. We have tried everything to break him, to make him obey. Nothing works. So now he sits in this cell and we use him for a different purpose. Thalrex leaned in close. We throw our worst prisoners in with him. Traitors, cowards, and foolish humans who think mercy is strength. The dragon kills them in seconds. It is quite entertaining. Hana's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "You're a monster." "No," Thalrex replied. "I am practical. You will die. Your body will feed the beast, and the other humans will learn that mercy is weakness. A perfect lesson." He nodded to the guards. They grabbed Hana's arms and dragged her toward a smaller door to the side of the observation window. The energy cuffs on her wrists suddenly released, falling to the floor. She wouldn't need them where she was going. The door opened, revealing a dark tunnel that led down into the cell. Hana could feel heat coming from inside, and that sulfur smell was stronger now, mixed with something else. Smoke. Old blood. Death. "Any last words?" Thalrex asked, clearly enjoying himself. Hana looked at him with steady eyes. "I hope someday someone shows you the mercy you never gave others." His smile vanished. "Throw her in." The guards shoved her hard and Hana tumbled down the tunnel. She hit the floor of the cell and rolled, the stone scraping her already bruised body. Behind her, the tunnel door slammed shut with a final terrible sound. For a moment, there was only silence. Hana pushed herself to her knees, breathing hard. The cell was dark except for a faint red glow coming from somewhere ahead. The air was so hot she could barely breathe. Sweat ran down her face, then she heard it. A low sound, deep and rumbling like distant thunder. The floor vibrated under her hands. In the shadows at the far end of the cell, two huge eyes opened. They glowed like burning coals, amber and fierce and full of ancient rage. The dragon was waking up. Hana got to her feet, her legs shaking. She could see more now as her eyes adjusted. The creature was enormous, at least 30 feet from nose to tail. Its scales were deep crimson, catching the dim light like rubies. Massive wings were folded against its back. Its claws were as long as her forearms, black and sharp. Korath rose to his full height, and Hana realized she had never seen anything so terrifying and so beautiful at the same time. The dragon's head swung toward her, nostrils flaring. A growl built in its throat, growing louder. Above, she could hear the Vrexians gathering at the observation window. She could hear their voices, excited and cruel. They were placing bets on how long she would survive. Most guessed less than 10 seconds. Korath took a step toward her, then another. His mouth opened, showing teeth like swords. Heat poured from his throat, and Hana knew that fire would come next. This was it. This was how she would die. But then something made her pause. Something in those burning eyes. She had seen that look before. In the eyes of wounded soldiers lying on her operating table. Not just rage, pain, fear, loneliness. This creature wasn't just a monster. It was a prisoner just like her. It had been hurt, tortured, broken. The Vrexians had done this to both of them. Hana made a choice. If she was going to die, she would die being herself. She would die being a healer. She didn't run. She didn't scream. Instead, she stood perfectly still and looked into those amber eyes. And then, very softly, she began to hum. It was a song her grandmother Myung had taught her long ago, back on New Jeju. A simple melody, just a few notes repeated over and over. The old woman had used it to calm the great whale beasts that swam in the colony's oceans. All living things understand the language of peace, Myung used to say. You just have to speak it correctly. Hana didn't know if it would work on a dragon. She didn't know if anything would work. But it was all she had. The dragon stopped. Its head tilted slightly, confusion replacing some of the rage. The growl faded to silence. Hana woke to the sound of metal scraping against stone. She opened her eyes and found herself still pressed against Korath's warm side, the dragon's wing creating a shelter above her. The scraping sound came from the dragon itself, using one of its claws to scratch patterns into the floor. She sat up slowly, her body aching but rested. The dragon turned its massive head to look at her, and Hana saw something new in those amber eyes. Recognition, maybe even warmth. "Good morning," she said softly, though she had no idea if it was actually morning. Time had no meaning in this cell. There were no windows, no clocks, just the constant dim red glow from vents in the walls. Korath rumbled in response, a sound that vibrated through her chest. Not threatening, almost friendly. A slot in the cell door opened with a clang, and a tray of food slid through before the slot snapped shut again. Hana walked over and picked up the tray. The food was gray and lumpy, some kind of protein paste that smelled awful. There was also a small container of water. She brought the tray back to where Korath waited. The dragon watched with interest as she sat down and examined the food. Hana's stomach growled. She hadn't eaten in over a day, but looking at the portions she realized something. This was barely enough for one person, and certainly not enough to share with a creature the size of a small building. Yet the dragon had been in this cell for cycles, according to Thalrex. What did they feed it? The answer came when she noticed the burn marks on the floor, the scattered bones in the far corner. They didn't feed it regularly. They threw prisoners in and the dragon ate them. That was the point. Hana's stomach turned. She looked at Korath, saw the intelligence in its eyes, and felt sick. They had forced this creature to become what they wanted, a killer, a monster. "You must be starving," she said quietly. She broke the protein paste in half and held out one portion to the dragon. Korath sniffed it, then gently took it from her hand with its teeth, careful not to hurt her. The dragon swallowed it in one gulp, then watched her eat her half. It wasn't much, but it was something. They would face whatever came next together. Over the next 3 cycles, a routine developed. Food came once per cycle through the slot. Hana always shared it with Korith. She continued treating the dragon's wounds, and they were healing well. The infection was clearing, and the broken claw was setting properly. But more importantly, Hana was learning. She watched the guards when they passed by the observation window. She counted the time between their patrols. She memorized their patterns. The guards changed every 6 hours. There were always 3 of them. They would check the observation window, make notes on a data pad, then move on. But Hana noticed something else. Every 6 hours, for just a moment, the lights flickered. The ray shield that covered the entrance tunnel would pulse, growing slightly dimmer before stabilizing again. She had seen this before. Her friend Lieutenant Day, an engineer in the human forces, had explained power systems to her during their deployment. Every ship has to redistribute power periodically, he had said. Life support, weapons, shields, engines. They all need their turn. For just a few seconds, some systems run on backup power while the main grid rebalances. That flicker meant the ray shield was running on backup power for a few seconds, and backup power was always weaker. Hana began to form a plan. She still had her medical kit, and inside it was a portable scanner. The scanner was designed to analyze tissue and wounds, but it was also a sophisticated piece of technology. It had a power cell, processing circuits, and most importantly, it could generate a small electromagnetic pulse used to restart hearts in emergency situations. If she could modify the scanner, overload its power cell, and time it perfectly with the power fluctuation, she might be able to short-circuit the backup system. The ray shield would drop completely for maybe 30 seconds before emergency protocols kicked in. 30 seconds. That was all they would have. But there was a problem. Even if they got out of the cell, they were still deep inside a Rexian prison ship. There would be guards, security systems, locked doors. They would need to fight their way to an escape pod or hangar bay. Hana looked at Korith. The dragon was lying down, watching her with those intelligent eyes. In the past 3 cycles, they had developed a way of communicating. Not with words, but with feelings, with intentions. When Hana touched the dragon, pressed her hand against its scales, their minds brushed together. Images, emotions, understanding. She walked over and placed both hands on Korith's snout. The dragon's eyes closed, and Hana felt that connection open between them. She showed it what she was thinking. Images of the ray shield falling, the 2 of them running through corridors, finding a ship, flying away to freedom. Korith's response came as a flood of sensations, the joy of flight, the need to return home to the plasma storms of Sindara Prime, but also fear, pain, memories of shock collars and weapons fire. Hana sent back feelings of reassurance. Together, strong, free. The dragon's eyes opened, and Hana saw determination there. Korith understood, and Korith agreed. They would escape or die trying. Either was better than staying in this cage. Hana spent the next hours working on her scanner. She carefully opened the casing using a small tool from her medical kit. Inside was a maze of circuits and wiring. She had watched Day work on similar devices before, had learned the basics even though it wasn't her specialty. She disconnected the safety limiters on the power cell and rewired the electromagnetic pulse generator to discharge all its energy at once. It would burn out the scanner completely, make it useless, but it would create a powerful localized EMP. If she could get it close enough to the backup power node for the ray shield, it should work. She hoped it would work. They wouldn't get a second chance. Korith watched her work with patient curiosity. Occasionally the dragon would rumble softly. A sound Hana had learned meant encouragement. When she finally finished, Hana held up the modified scanner. It looked the same from the outside, but now it was essentially a small bomb. She wrapped it carefully and put it back in her medical kit. Now they just had to wait for the right moment. The next cycle, when the guards brought food, Hana noticed something different. Thalrex was with them, standing at the observation window with his arms crossed. His black eyes stared into the cell, watching her and the dragon with an expression that mixed anger and confusion. "You should be dead," his voice came through a speaker. "The beast should have torn you apart on the first day. Yet you live, you even sleep beside it." "How?" Hana looked up at him. "Because I showed him kindness. Something you wouldn't understand." Thalrex's thin lips pulled back in a sneer. Kindness is weakness. It makes you soft. It makes you pray. No, Hana said quietly. Kindness is strength. It builds bridges. It creates allies. You could never understand that, and that's why you'll lose this war. The commander's face darkened. Brave words for someone in a cage. Enjoy your pet while you can. Soon we reach our destination, a military base where scientists will study your strange bond with the creature. They will cut you both open to learn your secrets. Then you will truly understand weakness. The speaker clicked off. Thalrek stared at her for a moment longer, then turned and walked away, the guards following. Hana's heart raced. They were running out of time. If the ship reached that base, it was over. They had to escape now during the next power fluctuation. She turned to Korath and placed her hand on the dragon's side. Images flowed between them. Urgency, danger, now. We go now. The dragon stood, stretching its massive wings. The movement was confident, powerful. Ready. Hana checked her medical kit one more time. The modified scanner was ready. She positioned herself near the entrance tunnel, close to where the ray shield hummed with deadly energy. Then they waited. Minutes crawled by like hours. Hana counted her heartbeats, trying to stay calm. Korath stood behind her, a wall of muscle and determination. Finally, Hana saw it. The lights flickered. The ray shield pulsed, growing dimmer. She pulled out the scanner, activated the overload sequence, and threw it at the wall panel beside the ray shield. The panel housed the backup power node. She had studied it during her observations, memorized its location. The scanner hit the panel and exploded in a burst of sparks and electromagnetic energy. The ray shield flickered violently, wavering like water. Alarms began to scream throughout the ship. Now, Hana shouted. Korath lunged forward, smashing into the weakened ray shield with its armored head. The shield shattered like glass, energy dissipating in all directions. The dragon's momentum carried them into the tunnel, then out into the corridor beyond. Guards were already running toward them, weapons raised. But they were too slow. Korath's roar shook the walls, a sound of pure rage and freedom. The dragon's tail whipped around, catching two guards and sending them flying. Hana ran alongside the dragon, her hand on its side, sharing images of where they needed to go. She had memorized the ship's layout from glimpses through the observation window, from patterns in how the guards moved. The hangar bay. They needed to reach the hangar bay. Korath's plasma breath carved through a sealed door, melting the metal like wax. They burst through into another corridor, then another. Guards fired energy weapons, but the bolts bounced harmlessly off the dragon's scales. Hana felt the connection between them growing stronger with every moment. Space was silent and beautiful. Hana had seen it before during troop transports and deployments, but never like this. Never as a free woman in a stolen ship with a dragon curled up behind her. She checked the ship's systems, trying to make sense of the alien displays. Fuel was good. Life support was functioning. The navigation computer showed dozens of star systems, but she couldn't read the labels. She had no idea where they were or where to go. Hana turned in her seat to look at Korath. The dragon's amber eyes glowed softly in the dim cabin light. I need help, she said. I don't know where we are. I need to find human space, find my people. She placed her hand on the dragon's scales, and that familiar connection opened between them. She shared images of what she needed. Human ships, the symbol of Earth's forces. Safety. Korath rumbled thoughtfully. Then through their bond came a feeling. Direction. The dragon somehow knew which way to go. Maybe it was instinct, maybe something else, but Korath was certain. Hana trusted that certainty. She adjusted the ship's heading based on the feeling Korath shared, then engaged the faster-than-light drive. The stars stretched into lines, and the ship jumped into the strange space between spaces. They traveled for what felt like hours. Hana found emergency rations stored in a compartment, some kind of dried food that tasted like dust but gave her energy. She shared it with Korath, though it was barely a mouthful for the dragon. Finally, the ship dropped back into normal space. Ahead of them, a fleet of vessels hung in the darkness. Human vessels. Hana recognized the markings, the ship designs. Tears of relief filled her eyes, but then warning lights flashed across the console. The human ships had detected them. Weapon systems were locking on. To them, this was just another Vrexian scout, possibly an enemy. Hana frantically searched the communications panel, found what she hoped was the right control, and activated it. This is Corporal Hana. Human Medical Corps, serial number 7739 Delta, she said quickly.
I am piloting a stolen Vrexian vessel.
Please don't fire. I repeat, please don't fire. Silence. Long, terrible seconds of silence. Then a voice crackled through the speaker speaking in human standard language. Vrexian vessel, maintain current position. Transmitting emergency verification codes. You will be boarded for inspection. Hana sagged in relief. Understood. Thank you. 3 human fighters approached, weapons ready but not firing. They escorted the scout ship toward the largest vessel in the fleet, a heavy cruiser. Hana followed their instructions, carefully docking in the cruiser's hangar. When the docking clamps engaged and the hangar pressurized, Hana opened the hatch. Immediately she was surrounded by Marines in combat armor, rifles pointed at her. Hands up!
Step out slowly.
Hana raised her hands and climbed out. I'm unarmed. I'm alone except for... Korath emerged from the ship behind her and every Marine took a step back. Weapons raised higher. Someone shouted orders. The tension was explosive. Wait. Hana moved between the dragon and the Marines. Don't shoot. He's with me. He's friendly. That's a hostile alien life form, a sergeant shouted. Step away from it, no. Hana stood her ground. His name is Korath. He's a prisoner of war just like I was. He saved my life. If you shoot him, you'll have to shoot me first. The standoff held for a long moment. Then a new voice cut through the chaos. Stand down, Marines. The soldiers parted and a woman in an admiral's uniform walked through. She was older, her hair gray, her face lined with years of command. But her eyes were sharp and kind. Corporal Hana, the admiral said. I'm Admiral Rin. You were listed as missing in action on Arcturus 7. We thought you were dead. Almost was, ma'am, Hana replied. The Vrexians captured me. They threw me in a cell with Korath here, hoping he would kill me. Instead, we became friends. We escaped together. Admiral Rin studied the dragon. Korath stood perfectly still, watching the humans warily but not threatening. Fascinating, the admiral murmured. And you can communicate with it? Him, Hana corrected gently. He's not an it. And yes, we can understand each other. Not with words, but with feelings and intentions. The admiral was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she nodded. Very well. Marines, stand down. Medical team, check the corporal for injuries. Science team, I want full scans of the dragon, but non-invasive only. And someone get them food and water, for God's sake. The tension eased. Marines lowered their weapons. Medics came forward to examine Hana, and she let them, though she kept one hand on Korath's side the whole time. The dragon remained calm, trusting her trust. Over the next hours, Hana was debriefed. She told them everything. The capture, the torture, the cell, how she bonded with Korath, the escape. Admiral Rin listened to it all without interrupting. When Hana finished, the admiral leaned back in her chair. Remarkable. You've given us valuable intelligence about Vrexian prison ships and their security. But more than that, you've proven something important, ma'am. That different species can work together. That understanding is possible even between beings as different as humans and dragons. In this war, that's a powerful message. Hana shook her head. With respect, Admiral, I don't want Korath to be a symbol or a weapon. He's been through enough. He deserves to go home. Home? Admiral Rin raised an eyebrow. Where is home for a dragon? Sindara Prime, the planet with the plasma storms. That's where the Vrexians captured him. He wants to return there to his own kind. The Admiral considered this. Sindara Prime is deep in contested space. It would be dangerous. I know, Hana said quietly. But I promised him freedom. Real freedom, not just a different cage. Admiral Rin studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled slightly. You're a good person, Corporal. Stubborn but good, very well. I'll assign you a ship and an escort. You'll take your dragon friend home. Relief flooded through Hana. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me yet. The journey will take weeks and there's no guarantee you'll make it. But you've earned the right to try. The next day, Hana and Korath boarded a larger transport ship, one with enough space for the dragon to move comfortably. A small escort of fighters accompanied them, but they kept their distance, giving Korath space. The journey to Sindara Prime was long but peaceful. Hana spent the time caring for Korath's remaining wounds and simply being with him. They didn't need to talk. The bond between them said everything. She learned more about the dragon through their connection. She saw memories of his home world, of flying through plasma storms with dozens of others like him. She felt his longing for that freedom for his family, and Korath learned about her. He saw her memories of her brother Tay, of her grandmother Myung, of all the people she had tried to save over the years. He understood why she had chosen to help him, even when it seemed impossible. Finally, they reached Sindera Prime. The planet was beautiful and terrible, covered in swirling storms of red and orange plasma. Lightning crackled between clouds. The heat readings were off the charts. No wonder the dragons evolved here, the pilot muttered. It's hell itself. But to Korath it was home. They brought the transport as close as they dared to the upper atmosphere. Hana stood at the open cargo ramp with Korath, feeling the heat even through the ship's shields. Through their bond, she felt the dragon's excitement and also his sadness. He wanted to stay with her, but he also needed to return to his own kind. It's okay, Hana said softly, her hand on his scales one last time. You need to be free. You need to be with your family. I understand. Korath lowered his head and pressed his snout against her chest just like he had done in the cell. But this time it was goodbye. Then something moved in the plasma storms below. Shapes appeared, huge and graceful. Dozens of dragons emerged from the clouds, circling up toward the transport. They had sensed one of their own returning. Korath spread his wings, magnificent and powerful. He looked back at Hana one final time, and through their bond she felt his message, not words but meaning. Thank you, friend. Never forget. Never, Hana whispered. I'll never forget you. The dragon launched himself from the ramp, wings catching the superheated air. He roared, a sound of pure joy, and dove toward his kin. The other dragons surrounded him, welcoming him home. Together they spiraled down into the plasma storms, back into the fire where they belonged. Hana watched until they disappeared from sight. Tears ran down her face, but she was smiling. The transport turned and began the long journey back to human space. When they arrived weeks later, Hana was surprised by what waited for her. News of her story had spread. The medic who befriended a dragon. The woman who chose compassion over fear. Admiral Rin awarded her the Terran Star, the highest military honor. But Hana barely heard the ceremony. Her mind was still on Sindera Prime, wondering if Korath was happy, if he was healing, if he remembered her. After the ceremony, Hana requested a transfer. She wanted to go home to New Jeju, to her grandmother Myung. The old woman was still alive, still living in the small house by the ocean where Hana had grown up. When Hana arrived, Myung took one look at her granddaughter and smiled. You've learned something important, the old woman said. Yes, grandmother, Hana replied. You were right. All living things understand the language of peace. Even dragons. Myung hugged her tightly. I'm proud of you, child. Now come inside. You look tired. Rest, eat, and then you can tell me everything. They moved as one unit, thinking together, reacting to the corridor fell silent except for the distant wail of alarms. Thalrex stood before the hangar bay doors, the phase disruptor cannon balanced on his shoulder. The weapon hummed with barely contained energy, its barrel glowing blue-white. Behind him, more guards poured out of side passages, forming a wall of bodies and weapons. End of the line, human, Thalrex said, his voice cold and precise. You have caused significant damage to my ship. Killed 12 of my guards, but this ends now. Hana felt Korath tense beside her, felt the dragon's rage building like pressure in a sealed container, but she also felt something else through their connection. Fear. Not for itself, but for her. The dragon knew that weapon could kill them both. She placed her hand on Korath's side, sending calming thoughts. Wait. Think. Plan. You don't have to do this, Hana called out. Just let us go. We'll leave and never come back. Nobody else has to die. Thalrex laughed, that same breaking glass sound she had heard before. Let you go? You are property. The beast is property, and property does not make demands. He began charging the cannon, the hum growing louder. I will kill the dragon first. Then I will keep you alive just long enough to watch it die. That is your punishment for defiance. The cannon reached full charge. Thalrex aimed it directly at Korath's chest. Everything seemed to slow down. Hana's mind raced through options. They couldn't dodge in this corridor. It was too narrow. They couldn't retreat. Guards were behind them now, too. They were trapped. But then she remembered something. Something Lieutenant Day had told her about ships, about how they were designed, about their weaknesses. Environmental controls are always near the hangar bays, Day had explained during a boring night watch. Atmosphere, pressure, temperature. You need to regulate all of that when the bay doors open. Otherwise, everything gets sucked into space. Hana's eyes scanned the corridor walls frantically. There, 20 feet to her right. A panel marked with symbols she didn't understand, but the design was universal. Environmental controls. She locked eyes with Thalrex. You made a mistake. What? He sneered. You told me where your scientists wanted to study us. That military base. That means this ship is valuable to you. That means you can't afford to damage it too badly. Your point? This. Hana dove to the right, hitting the floor hard and rolling toward the environmental panel. Korath understood instantly through their connection. The dragon roared and charged straight at Thalrex, not attacking, just creating chaos. Thalrex fired, but Korath juked left at the last second. The phase disruptor blast missed by inches and hit the wall instead, blowing a hole through 3 layers of metal. Sparks exploded everywhere. Guards scrambled to avoid the debris. Hana reached the environmental panel and smashed it open with her fist. Inside was a maze of circuits and controls. She had no idea what any of it did, so she grabbed a handful of wires and pulled. Immediately, alarms of a different kind began screaming. Red emergency lights turned to yellow, then started flashing. A computerized voice spoke in the Vrexian language. Words Hana didn't understand, but the tone was clear. Warning. Danger. Emergency. The hangar bay doors began to open, not the outer doors that led to space. The inner doors, the ones leading into the corridor where they all stood. But those doors opening meant the atmospheric containment was failing. The ship's systems were trying to compensate, but Hana had damaged the controls. They were fighting against each other. Wind began to build, pulling toward the hangar. Not strong yet, but growing. Thalrex's eyes widened in rage and realization. You foolish creature. You'll kill us all. Maybe, Hana shouted over the rising wind. But you'll die first. Korath used the distraction perfectly. The dragon's tail swept low, knocking the legs out from under a group of guards. Then its wings smashed into another group, sending them flying into walls. The dragon wasn't trying to kill them, just disable them, push them out of the way. Thalrex raised the cannon again, but the wind was stronger now, making it hard to aim. He fired anyway. The blast went wild, hitting the ceiling. Metal groaned and buckled. A support beam crashed down, forcing guards to scatter. Go! Hana screamed at Korath. Go to the hangar. The dragon hesitated. It didn't want to leave her. She felt that clearly through their bond. I'm right behind you. Go. Korath roared once more, then charged toward the hangar doors. Guards tried to stop it, but they were scattered, disorganized. The dragon barreled through them like they were made of paper. Its claws scraped against metal. Its wings knocked bodies aside. Thalrex turned to follow the dragon's movement, the cannon tracking. He was going to fire again. At this range, he couldn't miss. Hana didn't think. She just reacted. Her combat medic training included basic weapons instruction. She spotted a fallen plasma rifle, grabbed it, and fired. The shot was clumsy, unpracticed, but it hit Thalrex in the shoulder. The commander screamed and stumbled. The cannon's aim went wide. Its next blast hit the wall just beside the hangar doors, blowing another massive hole. And that was the critical mistake. The atmospheric controls completely failed. The pressure differential became too great. Suddenly, the wind wasn't a breeze. It was a hurricane. Everything not bolted down began flying toward the hangar, toward the breach in the wall that opened into space beyond. Smaller guards lost their footing and were pulled screaming toward the void. Weapons, debris, equipment, all of it became deadly projectiles in the wind. Hana grabbed onto the environmental panel, her fingers white with strain. The rifle was torn from her grasp and disappeared into the chaos. She could see Korath in the hangar bay, the dragon's claws dug into the floor, anchored and stable. Thalrex was still standing. His feet maglocked to the floor, a feature built into Vrexian military boots. He was clutching his wounded shoulder, his face twisted in pain and fury. But he was raising the cannon again, slowly, fighting against the wind. He was going to kill Korath. Hana could see it. The dragon was a stable target now, couldn't dodge without being pulled into space. No, she wouldn't let that happen. Hana let go of the panel. The wind caught her instantly, yanking her off her feet. She flew through the air like a leaf in a storm, but she had timed it right. Her trajectory carried her directly into Thalrex. They collided hard. The commander's maglock held, but the impact made him stumble. The cannon fired, but Hana grabbed the barrel and pushed it aside. The blast went straight up, punching through the ceiling and into the deck above. Thalrex snarled and backhanded her. Hana tasted blood but held on to the cannon, using it as an anchor against the wind. They struggled, two figures locked together in the chaos. "You've destroyed everything," Thalrex screamed. "My ship, my crew. For what, for that beast?" "For freedom," Hana shouted back. "Something you'll never understand." She saw Korath moving. The dragon was fighting against the wind, pulling itself toward them. "Coming to save her?" "No," Hana yelled. "Stay there. I'm coming to you." She made her decision. With one hand she grabbed Thalrex's belt. With the other she reached down and found the maglock controls on his boot. She pressed the release. Thalrex's eyes went wide. "No, don't." The magnetic field released. Suddenly nothing held him to the floor. The wind took them both, ripping them away from their anchor. They tumbled through the air, spinning, the world a blur. Hana saw the hangar rushing toward them. Saw Korath's claws reaching out. Saw the massive hole in the wall beyond, showing the infinite darkness of space. They were going to fly right through it, right into the void. But Korath was faster. The dragon's jaws opened wide and clamped down on Hana, catching her in a cage of teeth. Gentle but firm. The dragon's head whipped to the side, and suddenly Hana was flying in a different direction, toward the center of the hangar, away from the breach. Thalrex wasn't so lucky. He flew past the dragon, past everything, his scream cutting short as he passed through the hole and into space. In seconds he was just a tiny speck, then nothing. Korath slammed Hana down onto the hangar floor and pressed a massive claw over her, pinning her safely. The wind continued to howl for another few seconds, pulling everything loose toward space. More guards flew past, more debris. The ship shuddered and groaned. Then finally, emergency bulkheads slammed down, sealing off the damaged sections. The wind died. The alarms changed tone. Emergency protocols were working to save the ship. Hana lay there, gasping, her whole body shaking. Korath's claw lifted and the dragon's face appeared above her, eyes full of concern. "I'm okay," she managed to say. "I'm okay." The dragon rumbled, a sound that mixed relief and worry. Hana forced herself to sit up. They were in the hangar bay, surrounded by scattered debris and groaning metal. Several Vrexian ships were docked here. Small scout vessels, cargo shuttles, even a few fighters, but no guards. They were all either sucked into space, trapped behind the emergency bulkheads, or too injured to fight. This was their chance, maybe their only chance. "Can you fly one of these ships?" Hana asked the dragon, then laughed at the absurdity of the question. Of course Korath couldn't fly a spaceship, but she could. Maybe. She had basic pilot training, enough to handle emergency evacuation craft. And these Vrexian ships couldn't be that different, right? She stumbled to her feet and ran to the nearest scout ship. It was small, sleek, designed for speed. Perfect. The entry hatch door.